Hey guys, what's up? I'm just sharing this in case anybody else wants to watch. A lot of people don't get my notifications. Okay, one more, right? Hey Zuna. All right. I think that's it. I think that's it, Miss A. Hey Kimmy, can you send me another oh, I'm just thinking, can you send me another email so I can edit those or like proofread and edit those I was just gonna say, yeah, I do. Can you email me? Just say hi. That way I get your link again. Hey Dragon. I'll do it tonight. I hear it's ringing, it's irritating. All right, I sent all the notifications out. To retype it? I guess hey Teresa. Hey Mama. I don't know, I guess it would be how long it would be. I don't know. Can I tell you when I'm done? I wouldn't think it's much, but I will listen. I'm helping with his pup. My son overfed his pup flour, so he has a full belly. Okay. Oh, your stories bring me life. I'm telling you. All right, where did we leave off? We're like halfway down the book. So we're in a new chapter. Promenading with lunatics. She's already in. Read the email and let me know, okay, so you know how long. It's over 2-hour movie. Oh, okay. I'll write it up for you. It's not like well, I do have other things to do, but I'm desperate for money. And plus, it sounds like something I would really enjoy. I shall never forget my first walk, when all the patients had donned the white straw hats, such as the bathers wear at Coney Island. I could not but laugh at their comical appearances. I could not distinguish one woman from another. I lost Miss Neville and had to take my hat off and search for her. When we met, we put our hats on and laughed at one another. Two by two, we were formed in line and guarded, don't touch, by the attendants. We went out a back way onto the walks. Hey, Sean. I am a pup grandma. I spell that pup, I say to his dog Flowers. Shh, don't tell your dad. Of course you would. I would do the same. It's so cute. All right, I'll eat it after eat. I will read it after this, Kimmy. It was not long after till dinner hour arrived and I was so hungry that I felt I could eat anything. The same old story of standing for a half and three-quarters of an hour in the hall was repeated before we got down to our dinners. The bowls in which we had our tea were now filled with soup, and on a plate was one cold boiled potato and a chunk of beef, which, on investigation, proved to be slightly spoiled. That's gross and inhumane. There were no knives or forks, and the patients looked fairly savage as they took the tough beef in their fingers and pulled in opposition to their teeth. These toothless, or with poor teeth, could not eat it. 1 tablespoon was given for the soup and a piece of bread. No, you can't go on there. No, 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 no. You're gonna change the channel and everything. Yeah, I'll drop my email. Nurses and doctors. I was like, huh? You're welcome. So they were fairly savage as they took the rough beef in their fingers and pulled in opposition to their teeth. Those toothless, or with poor teeth, could not eat it. One tablespoon was given for the soup, and a piece of bread was the final entree. Butter is never allowed at dinner, nor coffee or tea. Miss Maynard could not eat, and I saw many of the sick ones turn away in disgust. I was getting very weak from the want of food and tried to eat a slice of bread. After the first few bites, hunger asserted itself, and I was able to eat all but the crust of the one slice. Superintendent Dent went through the sitting room, giving an occasional "How do you do? How are you today?" here and there among the patients. His voice was as cold as the hall, and the patients made no movement to tell him of their sufferings. I asked some of them to tell how they were suffering from the cold and insufficiency of clothing, but they replied that the nurse would beat them if they told. Wow. I was never so tired as I grew, sitting on those benches. Several of the patients would sit on one foot or sideways to make a change, but they were always reproved and told to sit upright straight. If they walked, they were scolded and told to shut up. If they wanted to walk around in order to take the stiffness out of them, they were told to sit down and be still. What, expecting torture, would produce insanity quicker than this treatment? Here's a class of women sent to be cured. I would like the expert physicians who are condemning me for my action, which has proven their ability to take a perfectly sane and healthy woman, shut her up and make her sit from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. on straight back benches. Do not allow her to talk or move during these hours. Give her no reading and let her know nothing of the world or its doings. Give her bad food and harsh treatment and see how long it will take to make her insane. 2 months would make her a mental and physical wreck. I agree. Yeah, I just seen it pop up, Kimmy. Thank you. I have described my first day in the asylum as my other 9 were exactly the same in general run of things. It would be tiresome to tell about each. And giving the story, I expect to be contradicted by many who are exposed. That's my favorite kind. I love horror movies. Right up my alley. Freddy Krueger's my favorite horror villain. And Michael Myers. And Jason. I'm merely telling common words, without exaggeration, of my life in the madhouse for 10 days. The eating was one of the most horrible things. Expecting the first 2 days after I entered the asylum, there was no salt for the food. The hungry and even famishing woman made an attempt to eat the horrible messes. Mustard and vinegar were put on meat and in soup to give it a taste, but it only helped to make it worse. Mustard and vinegar were put on meat. I like to use mustard and brown sugar on my ham, but I don't know. And mustard and soup? I need to give it a kick, but if it's that horrible. Mustard and vinegar were put on the meat and soup to give it a taste, but it only helped to make it worse. Even that was all consumed after 2 days, and the patients had to try to choke down fresh fish, just boiled in water, without salt, pepper, or butter. Mutton, beef, and potatoes were the faintest seasoning. The most insane refused to swallow the food and were threatened with punishment. In our short walks, we passed the kitchen, where food was prepared for the nurses and doctors. There were glimpses of melons and grapes and all kinds of fruits, beautiful white bread and nice meats, and the hungry feeling would be increased tenfold. I spoke to some of the physicians, but it had no effect, and when I was taken away, the food was yet unsalted. Hey, Jill. Oh, I see that you called the other day. Sorry, I meant to call you back. I've just been really busy getting stuff done for the channel and then trying to earn money a different way. I found another way, another loophole. Hopefully it works. I think so too, Zuna. I think that's what mutton is. My heart ached to see the sick patients grow sicker over the table. I saw Miss Tilly Mayer so suddenly overcome at a bite that she had to rush from the dining room and then got scolded for doing so. When the patient complained of the food, they were told to shut up, that they would not have as good if they were at home, and that it was too good for charity patients. A German girl, Louise, I have forgotten her last name, did not eat for several days, and at last, one morning, she was missing. From the conversation of the nurses, I found she was suffering from a high fever. Poor thing, she told me She unceasingly prayed for death. I watched the nurses make a patient carry such food as the well ones were refusing up to the lee's room. Think of that stuff for a fever patient. Of course she refused it. Then I saw a nurse, Miss Curtin, go to test her temperature, and she returned with a report of it being some 150 degrees. Poor sheep. Oh, I don't blame you. Dragon, I would sleep too. It's poor quality lamb. So the report of it being some 150 degrees. I smiled at the report, and Miss Group, seeing it, asked me how high my temperature had ever run. I refused to answer. Miss Grady then decided to try her ability. She returned with a report of 99 degrees. Miss Tilly Mayer suffered more than any of us from the cold, and she tried to follow my advice to be careful and try to keep up for a short time. Superintendent Dent brought him in to see me. He felt my pulse and my head and examined my tongue. I told them how cold it was and assured them that I did not need medical aid, but that Miss Mayer did, and they should transfer their attentions to her. They did not answer me, and I was pleased to see Miss Mayer leave her place and come forward to them. She spoke to the doctors and told them that she was ill, but they paid no attention to her. The nurses came and dragged her back to the bench, and after the doctors left, they said, "After a while, when you see that the doctors will notice you, you will quit running up to them." Sorry, when they not notice you. You will quit running up to them. Before the doctors left me, I heard one say, I cannot give it in his exact words, that my pulse and my eyes were not that of an insane girl, but Superintendent Dent assured him that in cases such as mine, such tests failed. After watching me for a while, he said my face was the brightest he had ever seen for a lunatic. The nurses had on heavy undergarments and coats, but they refused to give us shawls. Nearly all night long, I listened to a woman cry about the cold and beg for God to let her die. Another one yelled murder at frequent intervals and police at others until my flesh felt creepy. The second morning after we had begun our endless set for the day, two of the nurses, assisted by some patients, brought the woman in who had begged the night previous for God to take her home. I was not surprised at her prayer. She appeared easily 7 years old and was blind. Although the halls were freezing cold and the old woman had no more clothing on than the rest of us, which I have described. When she was brought into the sitting room and I placed on the hand bench, she cried, "Oh, what are you going to do with me? I am cold, so cold. Why can't I stay in bed or have a shawl?" And then she would get up and endeavor to her feet, her way to leave the room. Sometimes the attendants would jerk her back to the bench and say that they would let her walk, and heartlessly laugh when she bumped against the table or the edge of the benches. And one time she said the heavy shoes which charity provides hurt her feet, and she took them off. The nurses made two patients put them on her again, and when she did it several times and fought against having them on, I counted 7 people at her at once trying to put the shoes on her. The old woman then tried to lay down on the bench, but they pulled her up again. It sounded so pitiful to hear her cry. "Oh, give me a pillow and pull the covers over me. I am so cold." This is sad. At this, I saw Miss Group sit down on her and run her cold hands over the old woman's face, down inside the neck of her dress. At the old woman's cry, she laughed savagely, as did the other nurses, and repeated her cruel action. That day, the old woman was carried away to another ward. Another chapter. Choking and beating patients? Holy shit. Miss Tilly Mayard suffered greatly from cold. One morning she sat on the bench next to me and was livid with the cold. Her limbs shook and her teeth chattered. I spoke to the three attendants who sat with coats at the table in the center of the floor. What I don't understand is how is it all the staff and the doctors and the nurses and everything, they're dressed properly, they have proper food, but the patients don't? I mean, wouldn't there be some sort of law against this, or was it more you had to prove it? Because this is sick. So I spoke to the three tenants who sat with coats on at table in the center of the floor. It's cruel to lock people up and then freeze them, I said. They replied, uh, she had on as much as any of the rest and she would get no more. Just then Miss Mayer took a fit and every patient looked frightened. Miss Neville caught her in her arms and held her, although the nurses roughly said, "Let her fall on the floor. It will teach her a lesson," Miss Neville told them what she thought of their actions, and then I got orders to make my appearance in the office. Yeah, I don't. When the hell was this? I always forget to say. I know she died in 1922, so it was in the late 1800s. Just as I reached the superintendent, Dent came to the door, and I told him how we were suffering from the cold and of Miss Mayer's conditions. Doubtless, I spoke incoherently, for I told of the state of the food, the treatment of the nurses, and their refusal to give us more clothing, the condition of Miss Mayer, and the nurses telling us because the asylum was a public institution, we could not expect even kindness. Assuring him that I needed no medical aid, I told him to go to Miss Mayer. He did so. From Miss Neville and the other patients, I learned what transpired. Miss Maynard was still in the fit, and he caught her roughly between the eyebrows or thereabouts, and pinched until her face was crimson from the rush of blood to her head, and her senses returned. All day afterward, she suffered from terrible headache, and from that on, she grew worse. Wow. Insane? Yes, insane. And as I watched the insanity slowly creep over the mind that had appeared to be all right, I secretly cursed the doctors. The nurses in all the public institutions. Some may say that she was insane some time previous to her consignment in the asylum. Then, if she were, was this the proper place to send a woman just convalescing to be given cold baths, deprived of sufficient clothing, and fed with horrible food? On this morning, I had a long conversation with Dr. Ingram, the assistant superintendent of the asylum. I found that he was kind to the helpless in his charge. I began my old complaint of the cold, and he called Miss Grady to the office and ordered more clothing given to the patients. Miss Grady said if I had made a practice of telling, it would be a serious thing for me. She warned me in time. Many visitors looking for missing girls came to see me. Miss Grady yelled in the door from the hall one day, "Nellie Brown, you're wanted." I went to the sitting room at the end of the hall, and there sat a gentleman who had known me intimately for years. I saw by the sudden blanching of his face and his inability to speak that the sight of me was wholly unexpected and had shocked him terribly. In an instant, I determined, if he betrayed me as Nellie Bly, to say I had never ever seen him before. However, I had once one card to play, and I risked it. With Miss Grady within touching distance, I whispered hurriedly to him, in language more expressive than elegant, "Don't give me away." I knew by the expression of his eye that he understood, so I said to Miss Grady, "I don't know this man." "Do you know her?" asked Miss Grady. "No, this is not the young lady I came in search of," he replied in a strained voice. "If you do not know her, you cannot stay here," she said, and she took him to the door. All at once a fear struck me, and he would think I had been sent there through some mistake and would tell my friends and make an effort to have me released. So I waited until Miss Grady had the door unlocked. I knew that she would have to lock it before she could leave, and the time required to do so would give me opportunity to speak. So I called, "One moment, Señor." He returned to me, and I asked aloud, "Do you speak Spanish, Señor?" And then whispered, "It's all right. I'm after an item. Keep still." "No," he said with a particular emphasis, which I knew meant that he would keep my secret. I could never do what she did. No how, no way. People in the world can never imagine the length of the days to those in asylums. They seem never ending, and we welcomed any event that might give us something to think about as well as talk of. There's nothing to read, and the only bit of talk that never wears out is conjuring up delicate food that they will get as soon as they get out. Anxiously, the hour was watched for when the boat arrived to see if there was any new unfortunates to be added to our ranks. When they came and were ushered on to the sitting room, the patients would express sympathy to one another for them and were anxious to show them little masks of attention. Hall 6 was the receiving hall, so that was how we saw all newcomers. Soon after my advent, a girl called Urena Little Page was brought in. She was, as she had been born, silly, and her tender spot was, as with many sensible women, her age. She claimed 18 and would grow very angry if told to the contrary. The nurses were not long in finding this out, and then they teased her. "Urena," said Miss Grady, "the doctors say that you are 33 instead of 18," and the other nurses laughed. They kept up this until the simple creature began to yell and cry, saying she wanted to go home and that everybody treated her badly. After they had all gotten the amusement out, of her they wanted, and she kept crying. They began to scold her and tell her to keep quiet. She grew more hysterical every moment until they pounced upon her and slapped her face and knocked her head in a lively fashion. This made the poor creature cry the more, and so they choked her. Excuse me. Yes, actually choked her. Then they dragged her out to the closet, and I heard her terrified cries hush into smothered ones. That's some scary shit. After several hours absent, she returned to the sitting room, and I plainly saw the marks of the fingers on her throat for the entire day. This punishment seemed to awaken their desire to administer more. They returned to the sitting room and caught a hold of an old gray-haired woman who I have heard addressed both as Miss Grady and Miss O'Keefe. She was insane, and she talked almost continually to herself and to those near her. She never spoke very loud, and at the time I speak of was sitting harmlessly chattering to herself. They grabbed her, and my heart ached as she cried, "For God's sakes, ladies, don't let them beat me." "Shut up, you hussy," said Miss Grady, as she caught the woman by her gray hair and dragged her, shrieking and pleading, from the room. This is barbaric. She was also taken to the closet, and her cries grew lower and lower, and then ceased. Oh, great. So that's their new treatment, is fucking choking people. The nurses returned to the room, and Miss Grady remarked that she had settled the old fool for a while. I told some of the physicians of the occurrence, but they did not pay any attention to it. One of the characters in Hall 6 was Matilda, a little old German woman who, I believe, went insane over the loss of money. She was small and had a pretty pink complexion. She was not much trouble, except at times. She would take spells when she would walk into the steam heaters or get up on a chair and talk out of the windows. In these conversations, she railed at the lawyers who had taken her prosperity. The nurses seemed to find a great deal of amusement in Miss Group, and heard them tell her perfectly wild things to call Miss McCartan. After telling her to say these things, they would send her to the other nurse, but Matilda proved that she, even in her state, had more sense than they. "I cannot tell you, it is private," was all she would say. I saw Miss Grady, on a pretense of whispering to her, spit in her ear. Matilda quietly wiped her ear and said nothing. That is wow. Wow, really? I believe it. I still don't understand how this shit still goes on. Well, apparently, according to her novel and what I read up, is she faked being crazy to get in there so she could out them and help and save the patients. I think she was, actually. Did you really, Joe? That's awesome. Next chapter. Some unfortunate stories. By this time, I had made the acquaintance of a greater number of the 45 women in Hall 6. Let me introduce a few. Louise, the pretty German girl who I've spoken of formerly as being sick with fever, had the delusion that the spirits of her dead parents were with her. "I've gotten many beatings from Miss Grady and her assistants," she said, "and I am unable to eat the horrible food they give to us. I ought not to be compelled to freeze for want of proper clothing. Oh, I pray nightly that I may be taken to my papa and my mamma." One night, when I was confined at Bellevue, Dr. Field came. I was in bed and weary of examination. At last I said, "I am tired of this. I will talk no more." "Won't you?" he said angrily. "I'll see if I can make you." With this, he laid his crutch on the side of the bed, and getting up on it, he pinched me very severely in the ribs. I jumped up straight in bed and said, "What do you mean by this?" "I want to teach you to obey when I speak to you," he replied. "If I could only die and go to papa." When I left, she was confined to the bed with a fever, and maybe this time she has her wish. Hey, trio. There's a French woman confined in Hall 6, or was during my stay, whom I firmly believe to be perfectly sane. I watched her and talked with her every day, excepting the last three, and I was unable to find any delusion or mania in her. Her name is Josephine Despereaux, if that is spelled correctly, and her husband and all her friends are in France. Josephine feels her position keenly. Her lips tremble, and she breaks down crying when she talks of her helpless condition. "How do you get here?" I asked. One morning, as I was trying to get breakfast, I grew deathly sick, and two officers were called in by the woman of the house, and I was taken to the station house. I was unable to understand the proceedings, and they paid the little attention to my story. Doings in this country were new to me, and before I realized it, I was lodged at an insane asylum. I was lodged as an insane woman in this asylum. When I first came, I cried that I was here without hope of release, and for Miss Greedy and her assistants choked me until they hurt my throat, where it has been sore ever since. Oh, I'm glad you didn't back down, and I'm so glad that good. Like that's amazing. Good for you. That's amazing. I wouldn't back down either. A pretty young Hebrew woman spoke so little English I could not get her story except as told by the nurses. They said her name is Sarah Fishbaum, and that her husband put her in the asylum because she had a fondness for other men than himself. Are you serious? Your wife don't like you no more. She likes other men, and you're gonna put her in a insane asylum? That's all it takes. I don't know why I'm laughing. I think it's I'm just in awe. Like these stories are insane from an insane asylum. Granting that Sarah was insane and about men, let me tell you how the nurses tried to cure her. They would call her up and say, Sarah, wouldn't you like to have a nice young man? Oh, yes, a young man is all right. Sarah would reply in her few English words. Good for you. I'd be right in your boat as well. Well, Sarah, wouldn't you like us to speak a good word to some of the doctors for you? Wouldn't you like to have one of those doctors? They're just taunting her. Then they would ask her which doctor she preferred and advise her to make advances to him when he visited the hall and so on. Oh my God. I had been watching and talking with a fair complexioned woman for several days, and I was at a loss to see why she had been sent there. She was so sane. Why did you come here? I asked her one day after we indulged in a long conversation. I was sick, she replied. Are you sick mentally? I urged. Oh no. What gave you such an idea? I had been overworking myself and I broke down, having some family trouble, and being penniless and nowhere to go, I applied to the commissioners to be sent to the poorhouse until I was able to go to work. But they do not send poor people here unless they are insane, I said. Don't you know there are only insane women or those supposed to be sent here? I knew after I got here that the majority of these women were insane, but then I believed them when they told me this was the place they sent all the poor who applied for aid as I had done. Have you been treated? I asked. Well, so far I have escaped a beating, although I have been sickened at the sight of many and the recital of more. When I was brought here, they didn't want to give me, or sorry, when I was brought here, they went to give me a bath, and the very disease for which I needed doctoring and from which I was suffering made it necessary that I should not bathe. But they put me in, and my sufferings were increased greatly for weeks thereafter. That is rigged up. They will put women in there due to their monthlies. And what, oh my God. A Mrs. McCartney, whose husband is a tailor, seems perfectly rational and has not one fancy. Mary Hughes and Miss Louise Shantz showed no obvious traces of insanity. One day, two newcomers were added to our list. The one was an idiot, Carrie Goss, and the other was a nice-looking German girl. Quite young, she seemed, and when she came in, all the patients spoke of her nice appearance and apparent sanity. Her name was Margaret. She told me she had been a cook and was extremely neat. One day, after she had scrubbed the kitchen floor, the chambermaids came down and deliberately soiled it. Her temper was aroused and she began to quarrel with them. An officer was called and she was taken to an asylum. What? This is freaking crazy. How can they say I'm insane merely because I allowed my temper to run away with me? She complained. Other people are not shut up for crazy when they get angry. I suppose the only thing to do is to keep quiet, so avoid the beatings, which I see others get. No one can say one word about me. I do everything I'm told and all the work they give me. I'm obedient in every respect, and I do everything to prove to them that I am sane. One day, an insane woman who was brought in, she was noisy, and Miss Grady gave her a beating and blackened her eye. When the doctors noticed it and asked if it was done before she came there, the nurses said it was. Hence the term hysteria, referring to the uterus. Wow, I did not know that. When I was in hall 6, I never heard the nurses address the patients except to scold or yell at them, unless it was to tease them. They spent most of their time gossiping about the physicians and about the other nurses in a manner that was not elevating. Miss Grady nearly always interspersed her conversation with profane language and generally began her sentences by calling on the name of the Lord. The names she called the patients were of the lowest and most profane type. One evening, she quarreled with another nurse while we were at supper about the bread, and when the nurse had gone out, she called her bad names and made ugly remarks about her. In the evenings, a woman who I supposed to be her head cook for the doctors used to come up and bring raisins, grapes, and apples and crackers to the nurses. Imagine the feelings of the hungry patients as I sat and watched the nurses eat what was to them a dream of luxury. One afternoon, Dr. Dent was talking to a patient, Miss Turney, about some trouble she had had with a nurse or a matron. A short time after, we were taken down to supper, and this woman who had beaten Mrs. Turney, and of whom Dr. Dent spoke, was sitting at the door of her dining room. Suddenly, Miss Turney picked up her bowl of tea and, rushing out of the door, flung it at the woman who had beat her. Good for her. There was some loud screaming, and Miss Turney was returned to her place. The next day, she was transferred to the rope gang, which is supposed to be composed of the most dangerous and the most suicidal women on the island. I just can't believe this. I hope by the time I'm through with this damn book that these people were punished. Right, Teresa? You have to be a certain person to have a certain job. And if you're going to be a nurse or a caregiver, um, a babysitter, even parent, you have to have love in your heart. You have to be a certain kind of person to be a PSW and stuff like that. And if you're not and you're only doing it for money, there should be screenings on all of that. Sure, people could lie, but their training, you'd figure it out. Oh my God, I know quite a bit of it about, like, I do, Kimmy. Not all, of course, but um I was watching Dr. Phil, and there was a bunch of videos that he had gotten about elder abuse in nursing homes. It was bad. Like this tiny little dainty 80-year-old woman was like 60 pounds and she was black and blue, the whole body, her face, everything. And they're all like, I don't know. She fell. I don't know. And they get away with it. How? At first, I could not sleep and did not want to so long as I could hear anything new. The night nurses may have complained of the fact. At any rate, one night they came in and tried to make me take a dose of some mixture out of glass to make me sleep. They said, "Glass?" They send a patient. They send a patient to a mental hospital due to he refused his medications. He took medications for me, but after I left, they did not. Oh my God. Yeah, you definitely would be the great person for that, Dragon. Absolutely. Holy shit. We should do, if you're interested, Kimmy, we should do a live on this. Bring awareness to it. I'm sorry about your father. Rehab, and he goes in, walks in, within 2 weeks he's dead. Oh my God. It's just not right. I want you to tell all. We should do it. Um, what days are you available? Tomorrow's Wednesday. I don't think I have anything, but it might be too soon for you. Um, yeah, me too. I'm game. Every day. Okay, what about tomorrow's Wednesday. I feel like I have something to do tomorrow, or I should do something tomorrow, or there's something I'm supposed to do. And Thursday I'm reading Jack the Rippers. How about Friday? Oh, I'm sorry. It's awesome that you don't act like you're a handicap. You know what I mean? You're just like kick out. I wouldn't have known. Then again, I don't know what your handicap is. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually, whenever I do my lives, I always do them at 7. Is that a good enough time for you? I can research the videos and just get some. Really, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, so is Teresa, poor girl. Broken back in 2 oh my god. I do appreciate that, Mama. Okay, so we'll do it Friday at 7. I'll look for some videos, some clips. I'll do some research on the web, and then I want you to come up, or you to come up right in the beginning and explain your stories for being a nurse for 19 years. You had to lift 240 pounds. Oh my, yeah, that's not right. You could have broke your back. Is that why your back's broken 2 places? I don't mean to be rude to the woman. That's 240 pounds. That's a very nice compliment. I want it on my screen. That is insane. But I think that would be good. What? Well, welcome to the Disabled Club. I am, you just can't see it. Oh my God, Kimmy. And about the boiled a woman alive? Yeah, let's do it. We're doing it Friday at 7 p.m. Yeah, that's okay. So I'll look up some clips about the elder abuse, and then you just tell your stories. And frig, we'd probably be on for a good 2 hours if you wanted to. All right. Yeah, I'd love to hear them. Widespread them, get them out there. I'll make the thumbnail tonight so I can post it, and hopefully other people will join that have stories. Yeah, I know you will tell all, and that's what I'm hoping. Oh my God, the woman burned alive. Okay, wow, boiled alive. I don't think you'll get that way ever, Teresa. You're too determined. You know how much you can handle. You know what I mean? So at any rate, one night they came in and tried to make me take a dose of some mixture out of class. That is good. I think everyone should. That's what my mom's doing with my grandmother right now. They live together now. Yeah. She doesn't go to well, sorry. She actually is in a hospital. She still hasn't gotten out. I still don't understand what the hell's going on with her. She's in her 80s. She, I don't know, chipped her knee or something like that. Like she had surgery on her knee like years ago, and it's just been acting up. Oh my God, Kimmy. She's in prison? You should tell your story too, Dragon. My dad was in an old folks home, and there was a nurse who loved to hit your father. I wanted to smack that nurse and think it she's in prison. I'm glad she's in prison. Wow. I told them I would do nothing of the sort, and they left me. I hoped for the night. My hopes were vain, for in a few minutes they returned with a doctor, the same that received us on our arrival. He insisted that I take it, but I was determined not to lose my wits even for a few hours. When he saw that I was not to be coaxed, he grew rather rough and said he had wasted too much time with me already, that if I did not take it, he would put it in my arm with a needle. Yeah, now, right? It occurred to me that if he put it into my arm, I could not get rid of it. But if I swallowed it, there was one hope. So I said I would take it. I smelt it, and it smelt like laudanum, and it was a horrible dose. No sooner had it left the room and locked me in than I tried to see how far down my throat my finger would go, and the chloral was allowed to try its effect elsewhere. All work said was oops. I want to say that the night nurse Burns and the hall sick seemed very kind and patient to the poor, afflicted people. The other nurses made several attempts to talk to me about lovers and asked me if I would not like to have one. They did not find me very communicative on the to them popular subject. Once a week, the patients are given a bath, and that is the only time they see soap. Can you imagine how disgustingly dirty you'd be in a week? Like your nails, even? Like, especially if you don't have utensils. Yeah, I believe that, Kimmy. Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing, Dragon. Yeah, Kimmy, right? I mean, I just, wow. A patient handed me a piece of soap one day about the size of a thimble. That's literally like half my thumb. I considered it a great compliment in her wanting to be kind, but I thought she would appreciate the cheap soap more than I, so I thanked her but refused to take it. On bathing day, the tub is filled with water and the patients are washed one after the other without a change of water. Ew, oh my God. I figured this Saturday is shopping day with my mom. What? You found a dead mouse inside of a patient? How in the hell? Oh my God, I can't wait till Friday. I gotta hear these. This is done until the water is really thick, and then it is allowed to run out and the tub is refilled without being washed. The same towels are used on all the women, those with eruptions as well as those without. I'm assuming eruptions. What is that, like pooing? The healthy patients fight for a change of water, but they are compelled to submit to the dictates of the lazy tyrannical nurses. The dresses are seldom changed, oftener than once a month. If a patient has a visitor, I've seen the nurses hurry her out and change her dress before the visitors come in. This keeps up the appearance of careful and good management. It is crazy. That's good, Jill. I'm glad. Oh, okay, maybe boils. Yeah. That's why the patient had a bad smell. They had a mouse inside. He was alive. He or she was alive, or were they dead? I think I read they were dead. Maybe I'm wrong. No way. The patients who are not able to take care of themselves get into beastly conditions, and the nurses never look after them, but order some of the patients to do so. For 5 days, we were compelled to sit in the room all day. I never put in such a long time. Every patient was stiff and sore and tired. We would get in little groups and benches and torture our stomachs by conjuring up thoughts of what we would eat first when we got out. If I had not known how hungry they were and the pitiful side of it, the conversation would have been very amusing, as it only made me sad. When the subjects of eating, which seemed to be the favorite one, was worn out, they used to give their opinions of the institution and its management. The condemnation of the nurses and the edibles was unanimous. The patient was alive, but the mouse was dead. Holy cow. So what? Like a mouse just went in there and in a wound and died? Or the patient put it in there? Oh my God. I don't, wow. I don't even know what to say. Oh, that's awesome, Dragon. As the days passed, Miss Tilly Mayer's condition grew worse. She was continually cold and unable to eat of the food provided. Day after day, she sang in order to try to maintain her memory, but at last the nurse made her stop it. I talked with her daily, and I grieved to find her grow worse so rapidly. At last, she got a delusion. She thought that I was trying to pass myself off for her, and that all the people who called to see Nellie Brown were friends in search of her, but that I, by some means, was trying to deceive them into the belief that I was the girl. I tried to reason with her, but found it impossible, so I kept away from her as much as possible, lest my presence should make her worse and feed the fancy. It was cold, so the mouse crawled up to get warm. The patient did not know who she is or where she's at. Oh my God, that's terrible. One of the patients, Miss Cotter, a pretty delicate woman, one day thought she saw her husband coming up the walk. She left the line in which she was marching and ran to meet him. For this act, she was sent to the retreat. She afterwards said, "The remembrance of that is enough to make me mad. For crying, the nurses beat me with a broom handle and jumped on me, injuring me internally, so that I shall never get over it. Then they tied my hands and feet, and throwing a sheet over my head, twisted it tightly around my throat so I could not scream, and thus put me in a bathtub filled with cold water. They held me under until I gave up every hope and became senseless. At other times, they took hold of my ears and beat my head on the floor and against the wall. Then they pulled out my hair by the roots so that it will never grow in again." Oh my God. This is freaking horrible. Hey, Crystal. The nurse loved you, loved you. Oh, that's awesome. See, that's a decent nurse. That's an awesome nurse. Miss Cotter here showed me proofs of her story. The dent in the back of her head and the bare spots where the hair had been ripped out by the handful. Oh my gosh. I gave her story as plainly as possible. My treatment was not as bad as I have seen others get in there, but it was ruined but it has ruined my health, and even I do get out of here, I will be a wreck. When my husband heard of the treatment given me, he threatened to expose the place if I was not removed, so I was brought here. I am well mentally now. All that old fear has left me, and the doctor has promised to allow my husband to take me home. Yeah, right? I would imagine in thousands. Hey, Heavenly Cow. I made the acquaintance of Bridget McGinnis, who seems to be sane at the present time. She said she was sent to Retreat 4 and put on the rope gang. The beating I got there was something dreadful. I was pulled around by the hair, held under the water until I strangled, and I was choked and kicked. Oh, I bet, and I believe you were. Absolutely. You have a fever? Oh, I'm sorry, Trio. I hope you get better like ASAP. All right, so I just read that. The nurses would always keep a quiet patient stationed at the window to tell them when any of the doctors were approaching. It was hopeless to complain to the doctors, for they always said it was imagination of our deceased brains, and besides, we would get another beating for telling. They would hold patients under the water and threaten to leave them there to die if they did not promise not to tell the doctors. This is crazy. Hey, Deb, this is a horror story, right? After breaking a window, I was transferred to the lodge, the worst place on the island, as it dreadfully dirty in there, and the stench is awful. In the summer, the flies swarm the place. The food is worse than we get in other wards, and we are given only tin plates. Instead of the bars being on the outside, as in this ward, they are on the inside. There are many quiet patients who have been there for years, but the nurses keep them to do the work. Among other beatings I got there, the nurses jumped on me once and broke two of my ribs. But I can help. No worries. I'm gonna read the rest of this book tonight, I think. I think I'll be done, like, yeah, there's only, yeah, there's like just a little tiny bit left. Then I'll start the other one about the letters in the attic, that they found in the suitcase. While I was there, a pretty young girl was brought in. She had been sick and she fought against being put in that dirty place. One night, the nurse took her, and after beating her, they held her naked in a cold bath and they threw her on her bed. When morning came, the girl was dead. Oh my, wow. The doctor said she died of convulsions, and that was all that was done about it. Wow. They inject so much morphine and chloral into the patients that it made them crazy. I have seen the patients wild for water from the effect of the drugs, and the nurses would refuse it to them. I have heard women beg for a whole night for one drop, and it was not given to them. I myself cried for water until my mouth was so parched and dry that I could not speak. I saw the same thing myself in Hall 7. The patients would beg for a drink before retiring, but the nurses, Miss Hart and the others, refused to unlock the bathroom, and that they might quench their thirst. This is sick. Have a good night, Jill. There's little in the wards to help. Oh, we're on the next chapter. Incidents of asylum life. There's a little in the wards to help one pass the time. All the asylum clothing is made by the patients, but sewing does not employ one's mind. After several months' confinement, the thoughts of the busy world grow faint, and all the poor prisoners can do is sit and ponder over their hopeless fate. In the upper halls, a good view is obtained of the passing boats in New York. Often I try to picture to myself as I looked out between the bars to the lights faintly glimmering in the city what my feelings would be if I had no one to obtain my release. I watched patients stand and gaze longingly toward the city they all in likelihood will never enter again. It means liberty and life. It seems so near, and yet heaven is not further from hell. Yeah, drugs make you thirsty, right? So if they're giving them all these drugs, you're literally like dying of thirst here, and they won't even give you a drop of water. Do the women pine for home? Excepting the most violent cases, they are conscious and they are confined in an asylum. An only desire that never dies in the one for release, for home. One poor girl used to tell me every morning, I dreamed of my mother last night. I think she may come today and take me home. That one thought, that longing is always present, yet she has been confined some 4 years. What a mysterious thing madness is. I've watched patients. Those lips are forever sealed in a perpetual silence. They live, breathe, eat. The human form is there, but that's something which the body can live without, but which cannot exist without the body, was missing. I've wondered if behind those sealed lips there were dreams we keen not of, or if all was blank. Still, as sad as those cases, when the patients are always conversing with invisible patients, parties, I've seen them wholly unconscious. at their surroundings and engrossed with an invisible being. Yet, strange to say that any command issued to them is always obeyed in about the same manner as a dog obeys his master. One of the most pitiful delusions of any of the patients was that of a blue-eyed Irish girl who believed she was forever damned because of one act in her life. Her horrible cry, morning and night, "I am damned for all eternity," would strike horror to my soul. Her agony seemed like a glimpse of the inferno. After being transferred to Hall 7, I was locked in a room every night with six crazy women. Two of them seemed to never sleep, but spent the night in raving. One would get out of her bed and creep around the room searching for someone she wanted to kill. I could not help but think how easy it would be for her to attack any of the other patients confined with her. It did not make the night more comfortable. One middle-aged woman who used to sit always in the corner of the room was very strangely affected. She had a piece of newspaper, and from it she continually read the most wonderful things I ever heard. I often sat close by her side and listened. History and romance fell equally well from her lips. I saw in one letter a patient while I was there. It awakened a big interest. Every patient seemed thirsty for a word from the world, and they crowded around the one who had been so fortunate and asked hundreds of questions. Visitors make but little interest and great deal of mirth. Miss Mattie Morgan in Hall 7 played for the entertainment of some visitors one day. They were close about her until one whispered that she was a patient. Crazy, they whispered audibly as they fell back and left her alone. She was amused as well as indignant over the episode. Miss Mattie, assisted by several girls she has trained, makes the evenings pass very pleasantly in Hall 7. They sing and dance. Often the doctors come up and dance with the patients. Wow. Oh my God. My grandfather always wore Old Spice, always. I'll never forget that smell. One day when we went down to dinner, we heard a weak little cry in the basement. Everyone seemed to notice it, and it was not long until we knew there was a baby down there. Oh my God, a baby. Yes, a baby. Think of it, a little innocent babe born in such a chamber of horrors. I can imagine nothing more terrible. A visitor who came one day brought in her arms her babe. A mother who had been separated from her five children asked permission to hold it. When the visitor wanted to leave, the woman's grief was uncontrollable as she begged to keep the babe, which she imagined was her own. It excited more patients than I've ever seen excited before at one time. The only amusement, if so it may be called, given the patients outside, is a ride once a week, if the weather permits, on the merry-go-round. It is a change, and so they accept it with some show of pleasure. A scrub brush factory, a mat factory, and the laundry are where the mild patients work. They get no recompense for it, but they get hungry over it. Oh, have a good night, Heavenly Cow. Next chapter, The Last Goodbye. The day Pauline Moser was brought to the asylum, we heard the most horrible screams, and an Irish girl, only partly dressed, came staggering like a drunken person up the hall, yelling, "Hurrah! Three cheers! I have killed the devil! Lucifer, Lucifer, Lucifer," and so on over and over again. Then she would pull a handful of her hair out while she cried, "How I deceived the devils. They always said God made hell, but he didn't." Pauline helped the girl to make the place hideous by singing the most horrible songs. After the Irish girl had been there an hour or so, Dr. Dent came in. As he walked down the hall, Miss Group whispered to the demented girl, "Here's a devil coming. Go for him." Oh, shit. Surprised that she would give a mad woman such instructions, I fully expected to see the frenzied creature rush at the doctor. Luckily, she did not, but commenced to repeat her refrain of "O Lucifer" after the doctor left. Miss Group again tried to excite the woman by saying the pictured minstrel on the wall was the devil, and the poor creature began to scream, "You devil, I'll get to you." So that two nurses who had sit on her to keep her down. The attendants seemed to find amusement and pleasure in exciting the violent patients to do their worst. Shriekford's. Hey, Shelley. Oh no, I'm so sorry, Shelley. It's sad. I'm sorry what happened to you. If anything happened to you. I always made a point of telling the doctors I was sane and asking to be released, but the more I endeavored it to assure them of my sanity, the more they doubted it. What are your doctors here for? I asked one whose name I cannot recall. To take care of the patients and test their sanity, he replied. Very well, I said. There are 16 doctors on this island, and excepting two, I've never seen them pay any attention to the patients. How can a doctor judge a woman's sanity by merely bidding her good morning and refusing to hear her pleas for release? Even the sick ones know it is useless to say anything, for the answer will be that it is in their imagination. Try every test on me, I've urged others, and tell me, am I sane or insane? Try my pulse, my heart, my eyes. Ask me to stretch out my arm and to work my fingers, as Dr. Field did at Bellevue, and then tell me if I am sane. They would not heed me, for they thought I raved. Again, I said to one, you have no right to keep sane people here. I am sane and have always been, so I must insist on a thorough examination or be released. Several of the women here are also sane. Why can't they be free? All right, well, have a great dinner, Dragon. To take care of the patients and test their sanity, he replied. Very well, I said. There, I just read that. They are insane, was the reply, and suffering from delusions. After a long talk with Dr. Ingram, he said, I will transfer you to a quieter ward. An hour later, Miss Greedy called me into the hall, and after calling me all the vile and profane names a woman could ever remember, she told me that it was lucky thing for my hide that I was transferred, or else she would pay me for remembering so well to tell Dr. Ingram everything. You damn hussy, you forgot all about yourself, but you never forget anything to tell the doctor. After calling Miss Neville, whom Dr. Ingram also kindly transferred, Miss Grady took us all to hall above number 7. In hall 7, there are Mrs. Croner, Miss Fitzpatrick, Miss Finney, and Miss Hart. I did not see as cruel treatment as downstairs, but I heard they make ugly remarks and threats, twist the fingers, and slap the faces of the unruly patients. The night nurse, Conway, I believe her name is very cross. In Hall 7, if any of the patients possessed any modesty, they soon lost it. Every one was compelled to undress in the hall before their own door, and to fold their clothes and leave them there until morning. I asked to undress my room, but Miss Conway told me if she ever caught me at such a trick, she would give me cause to not want to repeat it. The first doctor I saw there, Dr. Caldwell, chucked me under the chin. And I was tired and as I was tired, refusing to tell where my home was, I would only speak to him in Spanish. All 7 looks rather nice to a casual visitor. It is hung with cheap pictures and has a piano which is presided over by Miss Mattie Morgan, who formerly was in a music store in the city, who has been training several of the patients to sing with some show of success. The artiste of the hall is under, pronounced Wanda, a Polish girl. She is a gifted pianist when she chooses to display her ability. The most difficult music she reads at a glance, and her touch and expression are perfect. On Sunday, the quieter patients, whose names have been handed in by the attendants during the week, are allowed to go to church. The Catholic chapel is on the island, and other services are also held. I'm surprised they are allowed to go to church. A commissioner came one day and made the rounds with Dr. Dent. In the basement, they found half the nurses gone to dinner, leaving the other half in charge of us, as was always done. Immediately, orders were given to bring the nurses back to their duties until after the patients had finished eating. Some of the patients wanted to speak about their having no salt, but were prevented. The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in, but once there, it's impossible to get out. I had to intend to have myself committed to the violent wards, the lodge, and retreat, but when I got my testimony of 2 sane women and could give it, I decided not to risk my health and hair, so I did not get violent. I had toward the last been shut off from all visitors, and so when the lawyer, Peter A. Hendricks, came and told me that my friends of mine were willing to take charge of me, and I would rather be with them than in the asylum, I was only too glad to give my consent. I asked him to send me something to eat immediately on his arrival in the city, and then I waited anxiously for my release. I came sooner than I had hoped. I was out in line taking a walk and had just gotten interested in a poor woman who had fainted away a while the nurse was trying to compel her to walk. Goodbye, I am going home, I called to Miss Polly Moser as she went past the woman on the either side of her. Sadly, I said farewell to all I knew as I passed them on my way to freedom and life. While they left behind a fate worse than death. Adios, I murmured to the Mexican woman. I kissed my fingers to her, and so I left my companions of Hall 7. I had looked forward to eagerly to leaving the horrible place, yet when my release came and I knew that God's sunlight was to be free for me again, there was a certain pain in leaving. For 10 days, I had been one of them. Foolishly enough, it seems intensely selfish to leave them to their sufferings. I felt a desire to help them by sympathy and presence, but only for a moment. The bars were down and freedom was sweeter to me than ever. Soon I was crossing the river and nearing New York. Once again, I was a free girl after 10 days in the madhouse on Blackwell's Island. Next chapter, the grand jury investigation. Soon after I had bidden farewell to Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum, I was summoned to appear before the grand jury. I answered the summons with pleasure because I longed to help those of God's most unfortunate children whom I had left prisoners behind me. If I could not bring them that boon of all boons, liberty, I hoped at least to influence others to make life more bearable for them. I found the jurors to be gentlemen, and that I need not tremble before their 23 August presences. I swore the truth of my story and that I related all, from my start to the temporary home until my release. Assistant Director Attorney Vernon M. Davis conducted the examination. The jurors then requested that I should accompany them on a visit to the island. I was glad to consent. No one was expected to know of the contemplated trip to the island, yet we had not been there very long before one of the commissioners of charity and Dr. MacDonald of Ward's Island were with us. One of the jurors told me that, in conversation with a man about the asylum, he had heard they were notified of our coming an hour before we reached the island. This must have been done while the grand jury were examining the insane pavilion at Bellevue. The trip to the island was vastly different to my first. This time we went on a clean new boat, while the one I had traveled in, they said, was laid up for repairs. Some of the nurses were examined by the jury and made contradictory statements to one another, as well to my story. They confessed that the jury's contemplated visit had been talked over between them and the doctor. Dr. Dent confessed that he had no means by which to tell positively of the bath cold, what that was cold, and of the number of women put into the same water. He knew the food was not what it should be, but said it was due to the lack of funds. Oh, he fell asleep. If nurses were cruel to their patients, had he any positive means of asserting it? No, he had not. He said all the doctors were not competent, which is also due to the lack of means to secure good medical men. In the conversation with me, he said, I'm glad you did this now, and had I have known your purpose, I would have aided you. You have no means of learning the way things are going except to do as you did. Since your story was published, I found a nurse at the retreat who had watched us set for our approach. Just as you had stated, she was dismissed. Miss Anne Neville was brought down, and I went into the hall to meet her, knowing that the sight of so many strange gentlemen would excite her, even if she be sane. It was as I feared. The attendants had told her she was going to be examined by a crowd of men, and she was shaking with fear. Although I had left her only 2 weeks before, yet she looked as if she had suffered a severe illness, and that time so changed was her appearance. I asked her if she had taken any medicine, and she answered in the affirmative. I then told her that all I wanted her to do was tell the jury all we had done since I was brought with her to the asylum, so they would be convinced that I was sane. She only knew me as Miss Nellie Brown and was wholly ignorant of my story. She was not sworn, but her story must have convinced all the hearers of the truth of my statements. When Miss Brown and I were brought here, the nurses were cruel, and the food was too bad to eat. We did not have enough clothing, and Miss Brown asked for more all the time. I thought she was very kind, for when a doctor promised her some clothing, she said she would give it to me. Strange to say, ever since Miss Brown has been taken away, everything is different. The nurses are very kind, and we are given plenty to wear. The doctors come to see us often, and the food is greatly improved. Wow. Do we need more evidence? The jurors then visited the kitchen. It was very clean, and 2 barrels of salt stood conspicuously over near the door. The bread on the exhibition was beautifully white and wholly unlike what was given to us to eat. We found the halls in the finest order. The beds were improved, and in Hall 7, the buckets in which we were compelled to wash had been replaced by bright new basins. The institution was on exhibition, and no fault could be found. But the woman I had spoken of, where are they? Not one was to be found where I'd left them. If my assertions were not true in regard to these patients, why should the latter be changed so to make me unable to find them? Miss Neville complained before the jury of being changed several times. When we visited the hall later, she was returned to her old place. Mary Hughes, of whom I had spoken as appearing sane, was not to be found. Some relatives have taken her away. Where? They knew not. The fair woman I spoke of, who had been sent here because she was poor, they said had been transferred to another island. They denied all knowledge of the Mexican woman and said they never had been such a patient. Mrs. Cotter had been discharged, and Bridget McGinnis and Rebecca Farron had been transferred to other quarters. The German girl, Margaret, was not to be found, and Louise had been sent elsewhere from Hall 6. The French woman, Josephine, a great healthy woman, they said was dying of being paralyzed, and we could not see her. If I was wrong in my judgment of these patients' sanity, why was all this done? I saw Tilly Maynard, and she had changed so much for the worse that I shuddered when I looked at her. I hardly expected the grand jury to sustain me after they saw everything different from what it had been while I was there. Yet they did, and their report to the court advises all the changes made that I proposed. I have one consolation for my work. On the strength of my story, the Committee of Appropriation provides $1 million more than was ever given before for the benefit of the insane. The end. There's a couple more things here, apparently. Okay. By Nellie Bly, trying to be a servant. My strange experience at 2 employment agencies. Uh-huh. Okay, this has nothing to do with the book. This is just miscellaneous, apparently, of other things she's tried to do. Nellie Bly as a white slave. Jesus, this girl's done everything. She's- You all right, Jack? I just want to show you, shit, now I'm not gonna remember. What was the movie called? That's it. Sorry, I'm just looking for. Oh my God. I did not need to see that. I'm. Oh, oh my God, Deb. That's wow. Holy shit. I'm sorry. I watched the movie about Blackwell Island, and it had Christina Ricci played Nellie Bly, so I just wanted to show you the trailer for it. It's called The Nellie Bly Story. That was a good movie. I don't know, has anybody else seen that movie? The Escaping the Madhouse, Nellie Bly story? Hey, White Cats. You've seen this movie about a dozen times? It's good, eh? I like Christina Ricci. She's really cool. It's a great movie. When I was looking, oh, yeah, I see that. Hidden History of the Bull Street Asylum. Where the hell is this? Today it's a rotting building. Oh my God, I can't. I think I seen that movie too, and it was stupid. Exclusive 10 Days in a Madhouse, illustrated by Nellie Bly. Somebody already down here? Oh. 10 Days in a Madhouse. This is by Horror Central. Blackwell's Asylum. Here, let's watch this. Nellie Bly uncovering the Blackwell Insane Asylum.
My name is Nellie Bly. although my birth name is Elizabeth Jane Cochran. I was born on May 5th, 1864. When I was 6, I lost my father, and my family suffered financially. I had to stop going to the Indiana Teachers College, and I focused on helping my mother run a boarding house. One day, while reading the Pittsburgh Dispatch, I stumbled upon a pretty misogynistic entry, so I decided to write a letter to the editor. The editor not only read my response, he printed my rebuttal and offered me a job as a columnist. So, as a newspaper writer, I took the pen name Nellie Bly. As a woman, it was extremely difficult to find work. Nonetheless, I continued to
What
write.
is this, a
I went on to
reenactment?
publish my most famous work, 10 Days in a Madhouse. After working for the
Oh,
Pittsburgh Dispatch for
okay. This girl here, Elias Shapiro, says, this is a documentary like film made by my sister and me about a journalist from the late 1800s named Nellie Bly. KJ.
a few years, I got an assignment to infiltrate the Blackwell Insane Asylum from Joseph Pulitzer. Working under an assumed name, I took a room in a boarding house and set out to prove myself insane. It was quite interesting and funny. I wandered the halls and nearby streets,
Those
refused
are
to
all
sleep,
the drawings in the book.
ranted and yelled, and of course, this was all to get into the
Yeah,
asylum and
let's do
expose
that
its
shit.
injustices. I found that although the asylum was originally built to hold 1,000 patients, Blackwell was cramming more than 1,600 people into the asylum.
60
When I
years probably
arrived in the
still
fall
feels
of
like 6 seconds.
1887, extensive budget cuts had led to a sharp decline in patient
Um,
care, leaving just
actually, I'm gonna
16
ask
doctors on
you, Trio, okay, I already have a Patreon. Can I not show movies on that? I haven't even been into my Patreon in forever, but I want to start doing that movie night every Friday night for all my Patreons, and then that way YouTube can't kick me off or copyright strike me and all this other good shit. Like, can I use Patreon for that? I've never even tried. It is a good movie. Because I'm thinking, if so, then I guess before my live with Kimmy, we'll watch this movie. And then we can watch The Black Dahlia as well, because I wanted to watch that and keep getting kicked off.
staff. Additionally, doctors and staff had little training and, in many cases, little compassion. They ordered harsh and brutal treatments that offered little assistance. I quickly befriended my fellow inmates who revealed rampant psychological and physical abuse. Patients were forced to take ice cold baths and remain in wet clothes for hours, leading to frequent illnesses. They were forced to sit still on benches without
Oh
speaking or
my God.
moving.
Remember how they said in the book that it was turned into sludge before they would empty it and they wouldn't even clean it first?
Lasting 12 hours or more. Some
Oh,
patients were tethered together with ropes and forced to pull carts like mules. Food and sanitary conditions were horrific, with rotten meat, moldy, stale bread, and frequently contaminated water dished out. Those who complained or resisted were beaten, and there was the threat of sexual violence.
holy shit.
To add to the torment, the building was freezing. The draft went whizzing through the hall, and patients looked blue with cold. Within the first few days, I was forced to take an ice cold bath in dirty water, sharing two coarse towels among 45 patients. Also, nearly all night long, I listened to a woman cry about the cold and beg for God to let her die.
Yeah,
Another
we
one
just read
yelled
that.
murder at frequent intervals and police until my flesh felt creepy. So, after pretending to be mentally ill for 10 days, the New York World published my articles about my time in the insane asylum on Blackwell's Island in a 6-part series, actually. 10 Days in
Okay.
a Madhouse quickly made me one of the most famous journalists in the United States. Furthermore, my hands on
Thank you,
approach
Drew.
to stories developed into a practice now called investigative journalism. Following my work, a bill that was already under consideration, which would increase funding for mental institutions, was pushed through. Abusive staff members were fired, translators were hired to assist immigrant patients, and changes
Wow.
were made to the system to help prevent those who did not actually suffer from mental illness from being committed. Also, in 2020, I got my very own monument.
What? Really?
I truly believe my career reached new heights when I decided to travel around the world after reading the popular book Around the World in 80 Days. My trip
Yeah,
only
that was
took
her.
72
That apparently was her first book, the one that was, wasn't it? I think it was her
days,
first book.
which was a world record. I got married in 1845, and I retired from journalism. But after he died in 1903, I was left with the control of a massive manufacturing company. I went on to patent several inventions related to oil manufacturing, many of which are still used today. In my later years, I returned to journalism, covering the women's suffrage movement and World War I.
Wow.
As a woman, it is easy to go unnoticed, but that is all the more reason why my legacy must continue. America must not forget that women are a powerful force in history. I was a muckraker. I pioneered investigative journalism, all while taking action towards protecting the rights of the mentally ill, patenting relevant inventions related to oil, and advocating for women's rights. I must be included in the APUSH curriculum to diversify it from the familiar cis white male narrative and to empower other women such as myself.
All right. Well, there was some information I did not know there. Excuse me. I'll try and figure out Patreon, like what I can do on there and stuff. I have some videos that I've already uploaded to it, but it just brings you to my YouTube channel. So I'm wondering if I can actually, I don't know, play a movie in there and watch it with you guys. That'll be cool. I'll do that every Friday. Be awesome. All right, I'm gonna go. I'm getting hungry and I've got some stuff I need to do here. One, I need to go to the phone booth. Number two, I need to make a thumbnail for me and Kimmy for Friday at 7. Okay. All right, you guys have a great night. Thank you for joining me. Next book, what the hell am I on? Actually, I might start tomorrow. Because I don't know. I feel like I have something to read or do, but I can't remember. So tomorrow, if not anything, I'm gonna start reading this, and it's called The Lives They Left Behind, and it's suitcases from a state hospital. There's photos, there's everything. This is like, wow, it has everything in it. Everything. Proof, photos, you name it. So I would like to start this tomorrow because I remember we were reading the letter ones and they were really good, right? Yeah. So I'd love to read this. Okay. I'm gonna go. Thanks for joining me. Have a great night. And I'll see you guys tomorrow at 7. Bye.